de honesta, voluptate et valetudine.
Which translates to?
Honest, pleasure, and good health, roughly speaking.
Catchy. Not your typical beach read, though, huh?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And the author, this is the best part, was Platina, librarian to Pope Sixtus V.
Wow, talk about access to knowledge back then.
Right, and this was the Italian Renaissance. We're talking full-blown boom of new ideas, not just art and all that, but a whole new way of thinking about, like, our bodies, our place in the universe.
That's where those research papers you sent come in, the one on the Renaissance itself, and then, the history of health and wellness. Those give us the full picture.
Exactly. So, honest pleasure. Even before reading it, what hits you about that phrase, especially with health, right there in the title?
It's a challenge to how we think now, for sure. It's like we separate pleasure and health today like they're opposites.
Yes. It's refreshing. He's saying there's a smarter way to think about pleasure, not saying be a monk, but also not go wild. So where does he go with this in the book?
Well, he splits it into 5 parts: food, drinks, moving your body, just plain health, and then the human body itself.
So it's like a 15th century wellness guide.
Exactly. But with that Renaissance flair, you know.
What gets me is he goes deeper, like how different foods affect us, not just our, like, gut, but our personality too.
Oh, and that's where it gets really interesting. He says some foods can actually temper your personality. Even claiming a good diet makes you modest.
You are what you eat, taken to a whole new level.
Totally. And get this, he also noticed that those who are all about extreme pleasure, what he calls frivolous pleasure, they end up less satisfied overall.
So he was really onto something there. That's a dilemma we still face, right?
Yeah.
Going for the quick fix versus like building a deeper sense of contentment, which takes us back to honest pleasure. It's more nuanced than we might think.
Exactly. It's not about deprivation at all. It's about realizing that true fulfillment, it comes from making choices that line up with, well, our well-being.
I love that distinction. So how did Platina actually define honest versus frivolous pleasure? What made one better than the other in his eyes?
He was very clear that honest pleasure wasn't about being fleeting or like totally self-indulgent. It was about going for things that benefit both your body and your mind. Sounds pretty modern, right? Like mindfulness and that whole holistic wellness thing.
And this is where that research on the Renaissance is so key. Questioning everything, looking at things in a new light. Platina wasn't just like repeating old wives' tales.
Oh, absolutely not. He was on the cutting edge. And don't forget, they were rediscovering all these old texts. As the Pope's librarian, Platina had access to a treasure trove, medical texts that had been lost for ages.
So he's got new ideas coming at him left and right and all this ancient wisdom at his fingertips. How did this actually play out in the book? What did he have to say?
Okay, so get this. He talks about how food affects your body's temperature and humidity.
Wait, really?
Yeah, like he goes deep on how different foods can heat you up or cool you down, make you more dry or more moist. And this is way before we knew anything about nutrition or how digestion worked.
It's like he was intuiting stuff that we're only now starting to figure out with science. You know, it reminds me of something you mentioned earlier about the gut-mood connection. Was Platina talking about that way back then?
He was. He actually points out that what we eat can really mess with our emotions and even our sleep.
No way. That's incredible for his time. How did he explain that?
Well, it all goes back to humoral theory. Remember that? The dominant medical model back then.
Give us a quick refresher.
So imagine your body is this balancing act, right? And there are 4 humors: blood, phlegm, everyone knows phlegm. And there's yellow bile and black bile. Each one's got different qualities: hot, cold, wet, dry. Keeping them in balance was key to, not dying.
And if you eat the wrong things.
Things get out of whack. Hello, illness. Food was seen as the key to keeping those humors happy.
Okay, that makes sense. So what you ate, it was almost like medicine then, right?
Exactly. Like spicy foods were heating while fruits and veggies were generally cooling.
So Platina's big advice was all about choosing your food to keep everything balanced, in harmony. It's pretty cool how he connected food to our temperament, our emotions, sleep, even our dreams.
He even said the position you sleep in can affect your dreams.
Wait, seriously, like what?
Yeah, he thought sleeping on your back, it could make your dreams more intense, He doesn't really say why, but it's cool how people back then, they noticed those links between how you sleep and what you dream about way before, modern science got into it.
Right, like they were tuned into something we've kind of forgotten.
Okay, so food and personality, this whole idea. What were some of the examples Platina gave? What kind of foods did he have in mind?
Well, he's very careful about eating too much rich food, the fattening stuff. He thought it could mess with your personality, make you unbalanced. We got to remember, though, They didn't have our modern ideas about nutrition and body types and all that back in the 1490s.
Great. Totally different world.
But what's interesting is that he believed what you ate affected more than just your physical health, you know? It's like food had this moral dimension that we've kind of lost. He's not just saying eat your veggies. He's saying eat your veggies so you can be a better person.
Exactly. Remember modesty. Almost like Platina thought eating right could make you a more balanced, level-headed person. So different from how we see food now.
It really is.
Yeah.
So we've got honest pleasure, balance, and this food personality link. Anything else about Platina's take on, like, living well that stands out?
Oh, yeah. He's big on self-awareness, like really pay attention to your body, how it reacts to different foods, activities, even the weather. He talks about being aware of your emotions, your thoughts even. Like mental and emotional well-being, those were key to overall health for him. Super holistic.
Centuries ahead of his time. It's like intuitive eating or mindfulness, but like the 1490s version.
Right. And it wasn't just about you as an individual either. He thought where you lived mattered for your health, too.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like fresh air, clean water, those were important to him. And he wasn't a fan of places that were too hot and sticky. He also had thoughts about exercise. Thought you should move your body regularly, but not overdo it. Which makes sense when you think about it.
How so?
Well, back then, most people got plenty of exercise just doing their jobs. The idea of working out for fun, that was kind of new.
That's a good point. Things have definitely changed since then. But even though he was writing in such a different time, his message about finding balance still feels really relevant.
It really does. And that takes us right back to the heart of Platina's whole thing. True pleasure. It isn't about, like, chasing after quick thrills. It's about building a life of moderation, you know? Being aware of yourself, being in tune with the world. It's about making choices that feel good for your body and your mind.
And what I find so cool is that his message, it feels both wise, like timeless, and also surprisingly modern at the same time. It just goes to show you that even a book written over 500 years ago can still have something important to say to us today. Speaking of which, didn't you say he included recipes in this book?
Oh, yeah, he did. Although the parts you sent didn't have all the recipes, more like hints about what went on in Platina's Renaissance kitchen.
Okay, you've got to give me a taste. What kind of culinary magic was Platina whipping up?
Well, he mentions using spices, a lot of spices, cinnamon, ginger, cloves, that kind of thing.
Those were like gold back then, weren't they?
They were. It goes back to the humoral theory. Spices were seen as key to keeping those humors balanced.
Right, right. Food is medicine. It all comes back to that.
It does. And this wasn't just some random thing for him. Platina was a scholar, remember? He'd studied all those old medical texts. He truly believed food could heal. He even says some of his recipes could make you irresistible to others.
You got to respect his confidence. So we've got spices. What else was he into?
He was all about fresh, seasonal ingredients, which is funny because that's like the trendy thing now, but back then it was just practical.
Yeah, you got to work with what you got. Anything else about his cooking style we should know?
He was big on presentation. Food should look good on the plate as well as taste good. Like a true Renaissance man, he understood that we eat with our eyes first.
It's amazing how much those Renaissance ideals still shape how we think about food. The beautiful plating, the focus on fresh ingredients. It's like Platina is whispering to us through the ages, telling us to slow down, savor our food, and remember that a good meal is a work of art.
I love that. And this brings us to something important. We've got to remember the context. So the Renaissance, it was this explosion of art and ideas for sure, but it was also a time of huge change, you know? Everything felt uncertain, and people were starting to question the old ways of thinking, the old authorities, looking for new ways to understand the world and their place in it.
And wasn't that when the power of the church was being challenged?
Oh, absolutely. The Renaissance was all about encouraging people to think for themselves, explore new ideas.
So instead of just doing whatever the church told them, people were taking their health into their own hands.
Exactly. They wanted to know how their bodies worked, how to stay healthy, and this led to a renewed interest in ancient medical texts. Guys like Galen, Hippocrates, you know.
And Platina, being a scholar, would have had access to all of that.
Exactly. And you can see how these old texts influenced him, like the four humors, that whole idea of balance, straight from the classics.
So even though he's got these fresh ideas like honest pleasure, he's still working within the established medical system of his time.
He's blending old and new. That's the Renaissance in a nutshell. And it's what makes Platina so fascinating. He takes these ancient ideas and combines them with his own observations and experiences to create something totally new. Which makes you wonder, how much of what he said is still relevant to us? I mean, we've moved way past humoral theory and all that.
Right. Like we wouldn't go to Platina for medical advice today, but there's still something about his message, especially the part about balance and paying attention to your body, that just clicks, you know?
That's the beauty of digging into these old books. They make us rethink our own assumptions about the world and realize that maybe, just maybe, some things never really change.
It's true. And what Platina is saying about well-being, it's not about following the latest fads. It's about being mindful, finding balance.
Real pleasure, like the kind that lasts, that's not something you just stumble on. It takes effort, making good choices, being aware, and knowing how to be in the world, just like Platina said back then. We all have the power to make choices that make us feel good inside and out.
Now that's something to chew on. Thanks for exploring with us. We dove into honest pleasure, Renaissance vibes, and how to live a good, balanced life, all thanks to Platina.
Until next time, keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep finding those honest pleasures that make life so rich.